over here learning laws about Shabbat, and just by this amazing parquet. And let's get this party started. Refuah Shlema of Nama Sipora. May she very good, be very healthy from any health issues. And I said a bracha already. I hope the connection's not going to go, because the connection tends to be not the best. So I think we had problems last week when we did the video here, but I just moved position. So let's get the price. Making fantastic progress at the moment. We talked about milking animals on Shabbat, and we spoke about relating to one's business on Shabbat also. And now we are actually on a new section, which is, I believe, payment for services rendered on Shabbat itself. This number. And let's get this underway. Okay, friends, we're in Halacha Yud. Dinei Sachar Shabbat, hasocher et poel, lishmor et dirato, או את שדהו, וכתומה, אסור לתת לו שכר שבת, ואין הבדל בזה, בין אם יקבל את השכר קודם השבת, או אחר, אלא אין לו השכר הבלה, דהיינו שיעבוד עמו גם בימי החול, ושכר השבת יבלו עם שאר השכר. ולכן, קבלן דירות, הזוכה שומר לשמור על חומרי הבניין, צריך שישלם לו שכר שבת והבלעה. Friends, what's going on here? If someone hires another Jewish person to guard his home or his field, he may not pay him for having guarded it on Shabbat itself as a separate salary. It's got to be blown in, it's got to be swallowed in. It makes no difference whether the employer chooses to pay him before Shabbat or after Shabbat. He may pay him for several days of work together, including the day of Shabbat itself. Therefore, let's say if a building contractor hires someone to guard his building materials over Shabbat, he must arrange to pay him his wages together with the wages for other services he has rendered over here. So habla'a actually means swallowing in English, naturally. That's a Hebrew terminology. So now we are on Halacha 11, Yud Aleph, naturally. Renting a taxi or tractor to a non-Jew. What do you think the din is? Let's find out. Okay. מותר להשכיר מערב שבת מכונת חרישה או טרקטור לגוי, בכדי שהגוי יעבוד בה בשבת בשדה של גוי, ולא ייטול שכר השבת אלא בהבלעה. והיינו שישכיר את המכונה גם לאיזה זמן בימי החול, שאז השכר שמקבל אינו עבור שכירות יום השבת לבדו. It's permissible for someone to rent out a plow or a tractor to a non-Jew, even though the owner is certain that the non-Jew will be using this item on Shabbat in his own field. He may receive separate payment for the non-Jew's rental of this item for Shabbat. However, he must arrange to receive payments for renting it on weekdays and Shabbat together as one bill, let's just say. Okay, let's continue a bit. והוא הדין לנהוג מונית המשחיר בערב שבת את המונית לגוי באריסות, והגוי עובד במונית גם בשבת. במקומות שאין חשש שיסיע יהודים, וצריך שיטול רווח יום השבת בהבלעה עם שאר הימים, וקבע בעירנו לאל במקומותינו שהמנהג להשכיר מונית לנהג אחר בריסות. דהיינו שהנהג לבעל המונית מתחלקים ברווחים לפי אחוזים. מותר להשכיר מונית לגוי מערב שבת, אב שמסיע בה בשבת, שהכל יודעים שהגוי טורח ועובד בשביל עצמו. Okay, what's going on here, friends? It's allowed for someone to rent out a plow or a tractor to a non-Jew, even though the owner is certain that the non-Jewish person will be using this item on Shabbat in his own field. He may not receive separate payment for the non-Jew's rental of this item for Shabbat itself. However, he must arrange to receive payment for renting it, receive payment for the Shabbat day together with a payment for some weekday use. Also, one may rent a taxi to him for Shabbat only if there is no fear that it will serve Jewish clients on Shabbat. It was explained, we learned about, that it's permissible to make this type of arrangement with a non-Jewish person. Okay, Fred, good bet over here. Okay. המביא אישה לביתו כדי שתשמור על אלא ייתן לה שכר שבת בהבלעה. והיינו שתשמור על ילדיו גם בימי החול, ויבליע את השכר שבת עם שאר השכר. Okay. As a baby on Shabbat, he may not pay her directly for having watched her children on Shabbat itself. He must hire her for a weekday as well, and then he may pay her for both sessions together. It's the weather, hay fever, so I might sneeze a few times, so just excuse me if I do that. Probably coffee is not the best drink for it. We're on a YouTube live at the moment, and friends, we are on Siman 306, Halacha Yud Gimel 13 over here, discussing business for a mitzvah. Ne'emar b'pasuk, Mamotzi chavtzacha devei davar, v'amru Rabbeinu zichron livracha. Ketuvot, quoting from Ketuvot Daf Hey, the Gemara. V'betor v'shulchan aruch, chavtzacha asurim, חפשי שמיים מותרים, לכן מותר גם כן לשדך התינוקות ולדבר עם המלמד ללמוד תורה לתינוק בשכר ולמדו אומנות אבל שלא יזכיר סכום מעות. The prophet Yeshaya taught us to refrain from following your mundane pursuits. On Shabbat, our sages interpreted this to mean that it's forbidden to talk only when it does not involve a mitzvah over here. It's allowed to engage in monetary matters for the sake of a mitzvah. However, therefore, one may discuss the financial obligation of arranging a one's children. Let's say, for example, someone's trying to set up a shidduch on Shabbat itself. You have to discuss that for the sake of a mitzvah. Or to hire a tutor to Torah to want specific sums of money on Shabbat, however. So you can't, if you're arranging a shidduch on Shabbat or one thing, you must not, just quite windy at the moment, very hot day here in Israel. Got some wind over here. Got also like to have different people watching the shiurim and halacha yud daled. Paying a guard on Shabbat. You know, synagogues all across the world at the moment with anti-Semitism, you need a security officer in many of the synagogues. הסוחר הפועל לשמו לא הזרועים שבגנתו אינו נותן לו שכר שבת מפני שנראה כמקח וממחה בשבת אבל רשאי להשכירו בשכירות חדשית או בשכירות לשנה ואז מותר להועל. Not pay him specifically for guarding on Shabbat. Instead you should hire the guard and pay him on a monthly basis or an annual basis of it, so that his wages include his pay for weekdays and Shabbat together. So that's very interesting. Halacha Tetzvav now. Over here. What's going on here, friends? 15. Paying cantors, a chazan on Shabbat. They want payment. Let's see the din. The chazan. יש אומרים שאסור להשכיר חזנים בשליחי ציבור להתפלל בשבת או ביום טוב או בראש השנה או ביום הכיפורים. יש חולקים על זה ואומרים שכל שהוא לצורך מצווה לא גזרו חכמים עליו ומותר. וכן מותר לשכור תוקע לראש השנה שהועיל ואין אלו אלא לצורך מצווה לא גזרו חכמים על זה וכן נקרא לדינה ולכן יש להם על מה שיסמכו. הוא צורך מצווה, אין צריך לשלם בהבלעה ומכל מקום אינו רואה סימן ברכה מאותו שכר ולכן תור שיקנה בשכר זה איזה דבר מצווה כמו ספרי קודש ללמוד בהם, או תפילין של רבי ניצם, וכדומה. הוא מחמיר לקבל השכר, בהבלעה תבוא עליו ברכה, ברכת טוב. הלכה ט"ו, 15. Some poskim rule that it's forbidden to hire a chazan to lead the service on Shabbat, Yom Tov, or the Chagim, high holy days, since the chazan himself, the cantor, will be paid specifically for working days. Just told a minute. How's everything going? Just think sure and cut yourself. Said. Yeah. Oh wow, that's amazing. You too? No, it's fine, it's fine. Take care. Just seeing an old friend over there. So let's continue. Okay, other poskim, including the Shulchan Aruch, disagreed and ruled that since this is for a mitzvah, our sages did not impose this restriction on hiring them. According to this, it is permissible to hire as well. In practice, halacha follows the second lenient opinion, and those who follow it have a solid basis in halacha upon which to rely. The leading Rabbonim of the past centuries maintained this practice as well. Okay, therefore it's not necessary to arrange for the cantor to render some services to the synagogue during the weekdays so that he can be paid for all his services combined. He may be paid for serving as a cantor for Shabbat and Yom Tov alone, since his services are for the sake of mitzvah. The only restriction is that his wages not be discussed on Shabbat itself. Although this is technically permitted, as has been explained, our sages taught that the wages one receives for having served as cantor on Shabbat or Yom Tov are devoid of blessing and will not bring the cantor financial success of it. Therefore, it is recommended that the Chazan himself use these wages for the sake of mitzvot, such as purchasing Torah books to study or to purchase tefillin of Rabbeinu Tam. Or something along this line. Someone who follows the stringent opinion and makes sure to render some of the services for the synagogue on the weekdays so that he can get paid for the services he rendered on Shabbat and the weekdays together will receive a special blessing from heaven over here. So remember, I think the Chazonim on Rosh Hashanah, my local synagogue here in Israel, they also bid, I think, to get some of the aliyot. Probably they would be using the money they would have got, let's say, earned from being their shliach tzibur. But I must say also, to be a chazan, it must be it takes a lot of energy for a lot of people, especially on Yom Kippur, where people are fast. At the one hand, there'll be an extra adrenaline throughout the fast because they know that they've got something to do. So, but at the same time, you'll need to drink more and the urge to do that also. I worked in the year 2013 in a community in England on an internship. I remember it was, I had the adrenaline, but at the same time, I needed the energy also. Okay, friends, we are now on halach 16. This is Tedayin. Okay. משגיחי כשרות בבתי מלון ומסעודות בשבתות מותר להם לקבל שכר שבת מכשול ועוון והמחמיר לקבל שכר בעוולה תבוא על הברכה. Okay, friends, what's going on here? For the same reason, it's permissible to hire someone to serve as a mashgiach, a kashrut supervisor in a hotel or restaurant on Shabbat itself. This service is considered a mitzvah as well, since he helps the clientele to avoid the serious pitfalls that can occur in these establishments when a proper supervisor is not present. If the mashgiach is stringent and arranges to provide services on a weekday as well, so that he can be paid for Shabbat and weekdays combined, he will receive a special blessing from heaven. Paying instructors for Torah classes. What's the din within regards to that? הוא הדין שמותר לתלמידי חכמים לקבוע שיעורי בימי שבת במועד וללמוד עם הציבור גמרא או הלכה ולקבל שכר עבור השיעור והמחמיר לקבל שכר בהבלעה תבוא על הברכה. ומה שמקבלים שכר עבור לימוד הלכה לרבים אין זה שכר עבור הלימוד שהרי אסור ליטול שכר עבור הלימוד. דמה אני בחינם אף אתם בחינם אלו הוא שכר בטלה על מה שמניח כל עסקיו ומה שמותר לקבל שכר על לימוד של שבת אינו משום שכר בטלה אלא תמיכה וסיוע וחשיב כדבר מצווה לשרת בשבת. י"ז paying instructors for Torah classes. The same applies to Torah scholars who teach Torah classes on Shabbat and Yom Tov. They may be paid for their efforts of it. Since teaching Torah is a mitzvah, it is permissible to be paid for doing so on Shabbat. A Torah scholar will make sure to render some service during the weekdays so that he can receive his wages, combined will receive a special bracha from heaven. When someone is hired to teach Torah classes and is paid for it, he's not actually being paid for the teaching. Strictly speaking, it is forbidden to charge for teaching Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, he actually taught us. What did he teach? That just as he taught the Torah to all the Jews without being paid, we are also to teach it without being paid also. That's the pinnacle. When a teacher is paid, it is for the time he sacrificed to teach others, while he could have pursued other profitable ventures. Of course, this argument cannot be used to enable one to be paid for teaching Torah on Shabbat, since one cannot earn money on Shabbat. The fact that we pay Torah scholars for teaching classes on Shabbat is in reality a gift in recognition of his efforts on behalf of his students, or an excuse to the community to give him financial support so he may continue to study Torah. So that is one of the reasons within regards to that very important halacha. Over here. Okay, halacha yud chet, but halacha yud chet. Magid shiur kavua, she'enu yachol lemsor et shiuro b'Shabbat, mutar lo lishloch memale makom b'Shabbat bilvad, ve'leshalem lo avur hashiur. Okay. Let's say if the scholar over here, who regularly teaches a class on Shabbat, he must be absent one time, and he arranges for a colleague to substitute for him. The substitute may also be paid for the class that he teaches over here. Okay, now we're on halacha yutet. Okay, paying for blowing the shofar over here. What's it in? Pashat minhag yischo tokea lemei Rosh Hashanah v'mishalmim lo avur atkiot gam im ein hu tokea b'motzei Yom HaKippurim v'machmi lekabel sachar b'avla'a knidali tavo alav bracha birkat tov. The common custom is to hire someone to blow the shofar for the congregation on Rosh Hashanah. He may be paid for this, even if he renders no weekday services, not even to blow the shofar at the end of Yom Kippur. If this person is careful to arrange that he renders such a weekday service so that his wages will be a combination, as explained above, he will receive a bracha, a special blessing from heaven over here. So friends, we're on halacha chaf at the moment. Paying a tutor, is that allowed on Shabbat or not? מי ששכר מלמד ללמוד עם בנות דברי תורה בשבתות ובימים טובים מותר למלמד לקבל שכר עבור זה ואין בזה איסור לשכר שבת ומחמיא ללמוד עם הבן גם בימי החול כדי להבליע את שכר בשבת תבוא עליו ברכה ומותר לדבר עמו על זה בשבת ואף מותר לו שיקבל על זה שכר אך לא יקבע כמה שכר. Okay friends, what's going on here? הלכה כף. If someone, let's say, he hired a tutor to teach Torah to his son on Shabbat and Yom Tov, the tutor may receive payment for his tutoring. It's actually interesting. I remember speaking in a Daf Yomi clip in Jerusalem, in Talpiot, about this. I think it was Nedarim 37 or 38 or 36, one of those, maybe around that territory. Maybe earlier Daf Yomi, this was about more than a year ago. It was. So we're now talking about this topic over here. Okay, if someone hired a tutor to teach Torah to his son on Shabbat and Yom Tov, the tutor may receive payment for his tutoring. If he makes sure to tutor the boy on the weekdays as well, so that he can be paid for all the sessions combined, he will receive a special blessing from heaven. So ideally, if you're going to tutor someone, try and do it during the weekday also, so that the payment will be swollen up also. It's allowed over here, on Shabbat itself, to arrange with a tutor to teach the boy, and the tutor may be paid afterwards for that session as well. However, the father and the tutor may not discuss on Shabbat specifically how much the tutoring fee will be over here. Very, very important. Okay, friends, we're on halacha chaf aleph over here. Let's see the din. Leficha. מותר לשכור אברך ישיבה בשבתות ומועדים ללמוד עם נער בר מצווה טעמי הפרשה ולכינו לדרשת הבר מצווה שמאחר ולמדו דברי תורה ומוסר וגם למדו את טעמי המקרא וקריאת התורה על פי דקדוקיה. אין לאסור בזה משום שכר שבת, אולם גם בזה הוא טוב ונכון שילמד עמו גם במוצאי שבת כדי שיקבל השכר והבלעה. Likewise, one may hire a Torah scholar to teach a child on Shabbat to chant the Torah reading in preparation for his bar mitzvah, or to teach him a speech to be recited at his bar mitzvah celebration. Since all this includes various halachot and Torah values, it is including in the category of teaching Torah, and therefore it is permissible to be paid for these teaching sessions. In this case as well, it is best to teach a session on weekday so that the money paid will be for a combination of his services. Over here. At 22. Over here. Okay, now we're talking about renting seats in the synagogue. מותר להשכיר מערב שבת או מקומות הישיבה שבבית הכנסת אף לאותם מתפללים שאינם באים לבית הכנסת אלא בימים הנוראים או בשבתות בימים טובים בלבד ואין לעשו בזה משום שכר שבת אך לא ישכירו המקומות בשבת עצמה. Okay friends, what's going on here? Halacha 22. Halacha chaf bet. It is allowed for synagogue officers to rent out the synagogue seats during the weekdays. It's allowed to rent the seats even to people who frequent the synagogue only on the high holy days, or to those who come only on Shabbat and Yom Tov. This is not forbidden as a case of being paid for services rendered on Shabbat only. Nevertheless, it is forbidden to rent out the seats on Shabbat itself. Okay. Halacha Chaf Gimel. Payment for learning in someone's merit. Lilu Nishmat. Someone. Let's see. Halacha 23, Chaf Gimel. Ma sheyesh noagim, shemi sheyesh lo yartzeit b'Shabbat, or hilula, we call it also, sochem erev Shabbat, 10 אנשים, כדי ללמוד לעילוי נשמת הנפטר, ומבטיח להם תשלום עבור זה, אין איסור בזה משום שכר שבת. You know, people want to learn in memory of someone that's passed away, could be on Shabbat. Is that allowed or not? It's allowed to hire 10 men to study Torah on the day of the yard site of one's parents. If this commemorates a year or however many years a parent had passed away, or another loved one or another person you want to do memorial for, even when the yard site occurs on Shabbat, and one may approach the 10 men on Shabbat itself and promise them that they will be paid for their efforts. This is a common custom, and it is not prohibited to receive payment for rendering services on Shabbat itself. Okay, friends, we are now on Halacha Chaf Dalet over here. I'm braving the hay fever at the moment because I suffer very badly from it every single year. So let's see if we can get to the end of the section in this session over here, this fantastic session here on this beautiful day, here live from the city of Beit Shemesh. Chaf Dalet. מי שקיבל על עצמו לסיים מסכת או משנות לעילוי נשמת איזה נפטר, הוא מקבל על זה שכר. מותר לו ללמוד זה בשבתות, אף אם אינו לומד לימוד זה בימי החול, ומחמיא על עצמו ללמוד זה גם בימי החול, תבוא על הברכה. If someone was hired to study an entire tractate of the Talmud or to study Mishnayot, so the merit of a departed soul, he may schedule himself to study it on Shabbat days, only even though he is to be paid for his services. If he makes sure to study at least some of the material on weekdays as well, he will receive a special blessing from heaven, which is very interesting. Halacha 25, Chafei naturally. Beit Knesset she'en sham minyan mitpallim, והגבאים חפצים לקיים שם מניין בשבתות ומועדים ומשלמים אחר השבת לכל מי שיבוא להשלים המניין, אף על פי שאין לחוש בזה משום שכר שבת. גם אם יש בתי כנסת אחרים בעיר, מכל מקום אין זה ראוי ליטול שכר בעבור מצווה זו של השלמת מניין. Okay, so friends, what's going on here? If you've got a congregation over here and has difficulties of gathering together a minyan for the tefillot, and the officers wish to encourage people to come to the Shabbat services by offering to pay those who come, this is technically allowed, even if there are other synagogues in that city. Nevertheless, it is not proper to conduct for a Jew to pay for participating in a minyan itself. Prizes for rendering tehillim. What's the din over here? Halacha Chavav. Yesh להקל לגבי חברת תהילים, לחלק לילדים כרטיסים בשבת וביום טוב, עבור קריאת תהילים של ילדים קוראים בשבת או מועד, ואף מותר לחלק להם מתנות עבור קריאה זו, ואין לחוש בזה לשכר שבת. Okay. It's allowed for the person who leads children in a tehillim group. Naturally, over here in the city of Beit Shemesh, we have tehillim groups over here. It takes place all over the city. Very, very I encourage everyone in all your communities to do that, to keep the kids participated. Each Shabbat afternoon to award the children with tickets for participating in the group. He may even distribute gifts to the children on Shabbat to encourage them to continue coming to the group the following week. This does not infringe on the prohibition of receiving wages for services rendered on Shabbat itself. Okay, Halacha 27. Chaf Zayin. Hatzovel b'Shabbat, b'mayim tzonim u'mashalem al kach achar Shabbat. Ein lechush b'zeh l'schar Shabbat, u'machmi l'shalem b'abla'a. Tavo ala bracha. One may immerse in a mikveh of cold water on Shabbat and pay the mikveh attendant during the week. Naturally, a woman, you don't organize it, ideally what day you have to go to the mikveh, because it might happen to be on Shabbat. That will be the 7 days of the counting. After, obviously, you learn all the halachot properly within regards to the Shiva Nikiyim, with the time to when can you do it, after 5 days or however many days the halacha pertains. It might sometimes, say 13, 1 in 7 chance, it will fall on the Friday night itself. So you have to go to the mikveh on Shabbat itself. Halacha 27. One may immerse in a mikveh of cold water on Shabbat and pay the mikveh attendant during the week. If someone takes a precaution of combining the fee for his Shabbat immersion together with a fee for using the mikveh during the weekdays, he will receive a special blessing from heaven. Okay, halacha 28 over here, Chavchet over here. מותר לקנות מוניות מחברה של רובם הגויים, אף שהחברה עובדת גם בשבת, ואין בזה איסור משום שכר שבת, אבל אסור לקנות מניות מחברה של יהודים, מניות של יהודים, הפועלת בשבת, אפילו אם הפועלים העובדים בשבת הם גויים. So what's going on here? הנה הלכה, Chavchet over here. It's allowed to purchase shares, we're talking about shares over here, of stock owned mainly by non-Jewish people, even though the corporation operates on Shabbat as well as weekdays. The dividends one receives are not considered payment for services rendered on Shabbat. If the corporation is owned by Jews and it operates on Shabbat, it is forbidden then. This is the case even if the people working on Shabbat are all non-Jews. Okay, friends, we are now in Halacha Chavtet. Over here, 29. Okay, we're talking along the same topic at the moment. Ein liknot b'bursa moniyot chadashot mechevra shel Yehudim sheyodeh she'ovedet b'Shabbat. It's forbidden to purchase shares in a company owned by Jews that works on Shabbat itself. Okay. והיינו מניות שהם קודם שנמסרו למסחי כללי בבורסה והרוכשים נחשבים כבעלי החברה. Okay, this is forbidden only if one purchases the shares from the company itself. Once the shares have been sold in the stock market, then it's permissible to purchase shares of that company from people who had already purchased them previously. Okay. אולם מוצע לקנות מניות אלו מהקונים הראשונים לאחר שהתחיל המסחר במניות אלו בבורסה וכן מוצע למוכרים לאחרים ואין לעשו בזה משום לפני עיוור לא תיתן מכשול או משום איסור מסייע בידי עוברי עבודה ומוצע גם לקבל רווח כספי המתחלק מדי שנה ואין לחוש בזה לאיסור שכר שבת ומחמיא שלא ליהנות מרווח ימי השבת ולתת רווח ימי השבתות לצדקה, תבוא על הברכה. מוצר להשקיע בקרנות נאמנות שבחסות הבנקים. אף שאפשר שיקנו בהם מניות של חברות עבודות בשבת, שהרי אין זה ברור שיקנו מחברות העבודות בשבת. So friends, what's going on here? Okay. Furthermore, it is permissible to sell these shares to other people. These acts are not considered a transgression of placing a stumbling block before the blind, or that of assisting others to perform the sins. If one earns a dividend from these stocks, one may keep it. It's not considered profiting from Shabbat itself, from Shabbat business transactions. Okay, anyone who is stringent in this last point and gives a dividend to charity, let's say, will receive a bracha from heaven, a blessing from heaven. It's allowed to invest in trust funds under the umbrella of a bank, although it is possible that the bank officials may use the money for purchasing shares of Jewish companies that operate on Shabbat. Since the bank will not necessarily use the money for such companies, it is permitted. Okay, halacha 30 over here. מוצע להקפיד כספי חסכונות בבנק בתוכנית המעניקה רווחים לפי מספר הימים ואין בזה משום שכר בשבת. Okay, what's going on here? Number 30. It's permissible to purchase certificates of deposit from the bank, which means to deposit a sum of money for a specified amount of time for the interest it accrues daily. This does not infringe on the prohibition against receiving payment from the services rendered on Shabbat. Okay, friends, we're on halacha 31. Lamed Aleph, friends. Lending to a non-observant Jew, you're allowed to give that or not? Remember, they might not know the halachot. But let's see. יש אומרים שמותר להלוות מעות למחלל שבת בפרסיה. אף שבוודאי יעשה עסק בשבת עם הממון שמקבל כהלוואה. וכן מותר להשכיר את חנותו למחלל שבת בפרסיה. אף שיפתח את החנות בשבת. ויש חולקים. והיא חדשה למנע מזה טוב ונכון למנע. Okay. Some poskim, they rule that it's allowed to lend money to a Jew who publicly desecrate Shabbat. Likewise, it's allowed to rent a store to a non-observant Jew, even though he plans to open the store on Shabbat itself. Other poskim rule that these transactions are forbidden, and wherever it's possible, one should avoid such a situation over here. Okay, friends, we're on Lamed Bet. talking about printing press with non-observant Jewish employees. The printing press, they might be secular printing press, but Jewish also. מותר מקדין לצאת ספר להדפסה אצל בעל דפוס גוי שיש לו פועלים יודעים העובדים בשבת. Okay, it says an abbreviation now, I wasn't sure what it is. ואין בזה משום הנאה מעשה שבת כיוון שפועלים עובדים גם דמי החול והולכים אחר רוב הימים. ומכל מקום איסור נסיעה בידי עוברי עבירה. Okay. Technically, it's allowed to engage a non-Jew who owns a publishing house to print a book, even if some of his employees are Jewish who work on Shabbat itself, during the weekdays itself. Nevertheless, it is definitely proper to refrain from acts that will encourage, let's say, the wicked to continue in their sinful ways. This especially so in light of the fact that some poskim is forbidden to assist others to perform sins. Included in this decree that it is forbidden to assist even someone who is totally unobservant. Okay, renting dishes and cutlery. Is that allowed on Shabbat? Halacha 33. הסוחר, כלים לסעודה הנערכת בשבת. יש אומרים שצריך להקפיד שהשכירות תחול מספר שעות קודם כניסת השבת. או שתמשך אחת צאת השבת ותשלום יהיה בהבלעה. ולכן צריך להשתמש בכלים גם בערב שבת או במוצאי שבת. ויש אומרים שאין צריך להקפיד בזה. Some poskim ruled that if someone rents dishes and cutlery for a large Shabbat meal, he must use items not only for Shabbat, but also for some time before Shabbat begins or after Shabbat ends. In this way, the rent he pays will be for a combination of renting on Shabbat and on weekdays. Other poskim ruled that it is not necessary. Repairing traffic signals. Is that going to be allowed on Shabbat or not, friends? Halacha 34, Lamed Daled. חבר'ה של יהודים לתיקון רמזורים שהיה הם חילוניים שאם יקראו להם לעבוד בשבת לתיקון הרמזורים יעבדו גם בשבת. הפעמיים שיש צורך לתקן הרמזור משום חשש פיקוח נפש המקל לקנות מניות בחברה זו יש לו על מה לסמוך ואין בזה איסור משום שכר שבת אך על עובדי החברה לשאול רב אם מותר להם לעובד בשבת שידון בכל מקרה לגופו. There's a basis in halacha to permit one to purchase shares in a company that repairs traffic signals for the municipalities. Although its employees are non-observant and they rarely go to repair signals on Shabbat as well on weekdays, since these repairs are sometimes vital for people's safety and may be performed as on Shabbat also, the profits one receives are permissible. They are not considered payment for services rendered on Shabbat. Any Torah observant technician employed by this company must ask a competent rabbi before agreeing to go to make such repairs on Shabbat itself, and each case must be decided on an individual basis. Friends, we are now in Halacha 35. Lametei. אסור להיות חבר במוסד של יהודים שהוקם במטרה לעשות עם הרבים צדקה וחסד אם חברה זו מחללת שבת במועד כי יש בזה חילול השם להתחבא עמם אבל חברה שבלאו הכי פועלת ורוצים להשתתף בישיבותיה כדי להביא החלטות לחיזוק החינוך והתורה הקדושה יש מקום להקל ויעשו הכל על פי שאלות חכם. Now friends, it's forbidden to be a member of a Jewish charitable organization if its charter condones the desecration of Shabbat or Yom Tov. It is a desecration of Hashem's name for an observant Jew to be a member of such an organization, this is according to the Saka edition here. However, there is reason to permit one to attend the meetings of these organizations in the hope of persuading them to support Torah education and mitzvah projects. A competent rabbi must be consulted before embarking on such ventures. A bit. Paying for a hotel room, is that going to be allowed on Shabbat or not? Lamed Vav. המתאכסן במלון בשבת, מותר לו לשלם ערב שבת עבור הארוחות והלינה של שבת, ואין בזה חשש משום שכר שבת. משלם גם עבור הזמן שגר בחדרו, בערב שבת מוצאי שבת. It is permissible to pay a hotel in advance for renting a room and for meals eaten on Shabbat. Three more halachot and we finish for today, friends. Fantastic session it's been. Doctor's fee on Shabbat. Pay the doctor or not? Need a doctor. Pikuach nefesh sometimes you need. We're learning the second edition, friends, of the Yalkut Yosef if you're just joining in now. רופא שהוזעק בשבת לרפאה חולה שיש בו סכנה, מוצע לו לקבל מוצאי שבת שכר עבור הטיפול שקיבל בחולה בשבת, ואין בזה איסור משום שכר שבת, וכן שכר המיילדת בשבת מותר. אמנם אסור לדבר על שכר שבת. Okay, what's going on, friends? If a doctor was summoned to treat someone who is desperately ill, he may demand payment for his services after Shabbat. This is not forbidden as payment for Shabbat services. Likewise, a midwife who delivered, let's say, a baby on Shabbat, she may demand payment after Shabbat. In either case, they may not discuss the payment on Shabbat itself. Friends, we're in Halacha Lamed Chet 38. רופא חילוני שהוזמן בשבת לטפל בחולה שיש בו סכנה ודורש תשלום בשבת עבור הטיפול, יש להציע לו שיקבל משכון עד מוצאי שבת, ואז יבוא עליו לשלם לו. ואם אין הרופא מסכים להצעה זו, אין להקל לשלם לו בשבת, ואף אם בזה שלא ישלמו לא את שכרו ירשום הרופא את החוב בנקסו, אף על פי כן יש לאסור ליתן לו את הכסף, שאין לעבור על איסור קל כדי להציל אחר מאיסור חמור. If a non-observant doctor is called on Shabbat to administer treatment to a desperately ill patient and he demands to be paid immediately for his services, the family should attempt to persuade him to take some item of collateral for his fee until after Shabbat when they will pay him. Like give him a deposit or something, because, if he's not an observant Jew, he might not be understanding, unfortunately. If he refuses to accept this solution, the family may not pay him on Shabbat, even if he threatens to further desecrate Shabbat by writing up a bill for them. The rule in the halacha is that one may not commit a minor sin in order to prevent someone else from committing a major sin. But I will look into this topic more. Don't take my word for this, since I'm just quoting what the Yalkut Yosef is saying over here. Okay, halacha 39, ל"ט. מוהל שהוזמן ללמוד בשבת, אף על פי שמותר לו לקבל שכר ואין בזה משום שכר שבת מאחר, הוא דבר מצווה. מכל מקום, ראוי והגון יוצא שהקים את מצוות המילה, מבלי ליטול שכר כלל, הן בחול הן בשבת, ולא ייקח אלא שכר הוצאות. במקומות שבני תורה מצאים, רצים אחרי מצווה חשובה זו לקיימה בלי קבלה שכר כלל. What's going on here, friends? A mohel who performs a Brit Milah circumcision on an 8-year-old on Shabbat may afterwards collect his fee for his services. Even though he rendered his service on Shabbat, he may receive payment since it is for a mitzvah. Nevertheless, it is most fitting for the mohel to perform this mitzvah for its own sake, whether on Shabbat or even on weekdays, and not to ask for more than to have his expenses covered. In communities or people devoted to Torah, the Mo'alim compete for the merit to perform this mitzvah without thought of any compensation over here. This is what is written. Okay. Very, very interesting over there. Okay, friends, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. They give a side note over here, on the Saka edition. Apparently there was a case that was once brought before the great Rabbi, the Rashba, where a father was too poor to pay the town's mohel, and therefore the mohel refused to perform the circumcision. He commented, this mohel is quite different than what one would expect from the descendants of Abraham. Why is this? In all cities of Spain, every mohel, even one who is impoverished, seeks out the new fathers and begs them to allow him to circumcise a child for free. He even sends his friends to attempt to persuade the father on his behalf. This mohel, on the other hand, refuses to circumcise a child until his father goes knocking door to door to collect the money to pay his fee. With this conduct, this mohel testifies that he is not a descendant of Abraham Avinu. Wow, speaks in very harsh terms. The rabbi must strongly rebuke him, accusing him of not wanting to fulfill the mitzvot. So it's very important that to do it for its own sake, according to this footnote over here in the Saka edition. I'm going to leave you here for today, friends. Next up, we'll be talking about commerce on Shabbat, but this was Yalkut Yosef edition. Please, once again, this is Lilu Nishmat, Rabbi Leo D's wife, Lucy, Leah, her Hebrew name, and his 2 daughters. I'm wishing you all a great day. Also, please stubborn for Refuah Shlema of Naama Bat Sipora also.